Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one.
Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one.
Namo sadanto suchedoye alahadi samyao sambuddhoshe.
Namo sadanto suchetoye alahati samyo sambuddhoshe.
The unsurpassed, deep, profound, subtle, wonderful Dharma in 100,000 million eons is difficult to encounter. Now that I've come to receive and hold it within my sight and hearing, I vow to fathom the thus come one's true and actual meaning. 无上甚深微妙法，百千万劫难遭遇。我今见闻得受持，愿解如来真实义。 Homage to the Buddha's Flower Garland Sutra of Great Expanded Teachings. Buddha's Flower Garland Sutra of Great Expanded Teachings and the ocean-wide Flower Garland Assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Namo 大方广佛华严经 华严海会佛菩萨，南无大方广佛华严经，华严海会佛菩萨。Venerable Master and Dharma Masters and friends in the Dharma, good evening. Tonight we have Jing Kai Shi. Thank you. And myself, we will be studying and exploring the sixth ground of the 10 Ground Sutra with everybody. And Jing Kai Shi just came from San Jose, where she was doing the Medicine Master repentance in order to accompany me. So she's been traveling from CTTV to San Jose and today to Berkeley. I'm very happy to have her here. And she's been working in the girls' school for many years. Even before she became a nun, she was, because she has a background working in the public schools in speech pathology and counseling students and teaching. So she's been a great asset for many years. And then she left us for a while and went to places like Australia. But when she came back, we're very happy to have her. She's helping the current principal a lot and also being a core teacher. So I'll hopefully share a few stories from the school.
One of the classes I teach in the City of 10,000 Buddhas, the Developing Virtue Girls School, I teach ethics and we explore many topics. And one of the things we talk about is how Buddhism can be practiced by people of so many different spiritual paths, and we have a few girls in the class that are from Catholic and Christian backgrounds, and they have embraced Buddhism, and they've not given up their faith. Is this too loud? Is it okay? Okay, thank you. they've not given up their faiths, their spiritual traditions, but they have used Buddhism to support and to increase their own spiritual strength. And recently one of the girls shared about, she's Christian, and she shared going to a Christian camp last summer, and how she developed such a strength within, an inner strength, that she can handle anything. You know, she sometimes get depressed, like most students, like most kids at that age, teenage, 14, 15-year-old. You know, they're going a lot of emotional ups and downs, and sometimes she has questions about whether, in her mind, about whether, you know, leaving the school and going to the public schools. And she's realized how Buddhism has really supported her in her own spiritual journey. And she uses the word a rock. She says she's found her rock. So she gave a talk the other day, and she told the girls, you know, you have to find your rock, meaning that find a force or a strength that you can turn to in times of need, or in low times. But she told the girls, don't let it be your parents, because she asked the girls, do you have a rock? And some of the girls said, yes, my parents. And she says, no, it cannot be your parents, because because, you know, things change, and parents divorce, and parents go away, and sometimes we lose our parents, and sometimes parents are distracted. She said it has to be something more than that. And she recognized that in studying Buddhism throughout the, you know, virtue studies and Buddhism in our schools has helped her to look within and to focus and become more inward in her spiritual journey. And so it's almost as if she uses Buddhism hand in hand with her spiritual tradition of Christianity, and to bolster her, and she's very confident about her path in life, and feels very good. Actually, she told a story. It just came into my mind. She said she was with some of her friends, her peers, one day. She lives in an outlying area of, maybe she lives in Potter Valley, which is a little bit outside of Ukiah. And she said she was walking with some friends on a Saturday, I guess, and they were walking along, and then they diverted and took a path, kind of went down a kind of a little hidden path, and then so they were all walked together as a group. And then she realized they pulled out some cigarettes and were passing the cigarettes around, and she said she was not interested in smoking, and the pressure, she said, was so great. The peer pressure that she received she said it was so tremendous, and it took everything that she had to say no, because she knew that she was going to lose those friends after saying no. But she was, you know, strong in her resolve. She didn't want to get involved in smoking. And she said no, and then eventually she walked away, and she had to give up those friends. But she's so mature. Maybe mature is not the word. She's so firm in her belief and in her inner world that she recognizes that, okay, so if she loses those friends, it's okay, because, you know, she didn't want to sacrifice her principles and her moral values. So, yeah. Another student, she's been in the school for 13, little bit over 13 years. She came to the school when she was she came in kindergarten, actually, and now she's getting ready to graduate from high school, and much to her surprise, she got accepted into really fine college universities, and she got really generous amounts of scholarships. Yeah, she got some really fine scholarships, and she was so surprised. And I remember this girl. We all remember her going through her struggles throughout the course of these 13 years. And there were times when she said, "I'm not coming back to this school," and well, we all have our troubles, and yet she made it to the finish line and just persevered. And because she is, there was one point when she said to me, she said, she says it's particularly hard when she got into high school, and most of her friends were international students from Asia, and it was particularly hard for her. But she said, she just, sometimes she would isolate herself. She would do whatever it was to just continue on her day-to-day academic path, and sometimes she would shed tears, but she made it to the finish line, and like so many others. But I kind of singled her out because I remember the day she came into the school. Her mother brought her in her first day when she was about 5 years old. Now she's going on 18. She was about 5, and her mom told us, she chose this school. She says she wants to come to this school and she wants to graduate from this school. 5-year-old, with her little hat and her little jacket and her little blanket. And so it's just memories of...
Okay, I think you were the core teacher when she was in 4th grade or something?
I was assisting the core.
Oh, okay.
When she was in 4th grade, yes. But when she came into the school, I was an assistant, yes.
Yeah, so it's been a long term, and this parent, there's also a single mom. She's been very supportive of the school since the beginning, has been our PTO secretary and so forth. She used to be the secretary in a law firm, and she herself had gone back to school, to law school, and now she's a lawyer. So she also served as a really good model for her daughter to persevere. At one point, I remember, I forgot which year, their house burned because of a candle or something that was not extinguished while they were all away. So she had to, start from nothing. And so this girl, I also remember, and when she was young, she would always bring her blankie to school, and she would have tantrums or just get into these moods and not be able to relate to other people. Now she's this really wonderful, outgoing and generous and caring person. Okay, so now back to the sutra. This all does relate, because today we're talking about emptiness. So I think I'll let you figure out how it relates, but maybe we'll discuss it at the end again. And because the topic of emptiness is also kind of difficult to make concrete, being empty, we will also share some stories in the middle of explaining this. So, but first, I think you may have already read this passage last week, the 10 kinds of samadhis of emptiness on page 25 and 24. Maybe we should still read it again. Okay, so it's the middle paragraph, middle section, and we'll start with the Chinese. Everybody have it? 佛子菩萨住此现前地，得入空三昧，自性空三昧，第一义空三昧，第一空三昧，大空三昧，合空三昧，起空三昧，如实不分别空三昧，不舍离空三昧，离不离空三昧。此菩萨得如是时空三昧门为首，百千空三昧皆悉现前，如是时无相时无愿三昧门为首，百千无相无愿三昧门 皆悉现前. Disciples of the Buddha, when the Bodhisattva dwells on this, the ground of manifestation, he attains the samadhi of emptiness of entry, the samadhi of emptiness in the primary sense, the samadhi of foremost emptiness. The samadhi of emptiness of own nature, the samadhi of emptiness in the primary sense, the samadhi of foremost emptiness, the samadhi of great emptiness, the samadhi of emptiness of arising, the samadhi of undiscriminated, the samadhi of emptiness of combining, the samadhi of emptiness of arising, the samadhi of undiscriminated emptiness as it truly is, the samadhi of non-forsaking emptiness, and the samadhi of emptiness of non-separating separation. This bodhisattva attains those 10 kinds of samadhi doors of emptiness as primary, and then millions of samadhis of emptiness all manifest before him. In the same way, with 10 samadhi doors of marklessness and 10 samadhi doors of wishlessness as foremost, 10 million samadhi doors of marklessness and wishlessness all manifest before him. You can tell I'm really absent-minded, and Jing Kaisha is a reading teacher, so she's very good at tracking, helping me track. Anyways. Okay, so I just want to give an overall structure for these 10, because remember in the previous passage we talked about the Bodhisattva entering the 3 liberation doors, emptiness, marklessness, and wishlessness. So now having entered those doors, he's practicing 10 and then millions of samadhis in each one of them. And these 10 samadhis have a progression to them. So the first 5 of them, not counting number 4, so one, if you count the first 2 and then, the first 3 and then skip 4, skip the samadhi of foremost emptiness and then go to great emptiness and emptiness of combining. These are all contemplations and understandings. So we start out, you have to understand and you have to be able to contemplate to understand. And then after that, there's number 4, the foremost emptiness one, is about avoiding laxness. So then you're practicing and you're being very vigorous based on your understanding, and you're vigorous so that we'll explain that later. And then number 7, which is the emptiness of arising, is about how you the rising is a rising of merit and virtue, and it's attaining a level of excellence. And then the last 3 are about practicing in the world, according with the world. So we'll go into each of them. So the first 3 is about contemplating emptiness on the basis of phenomena. And I think last time you talked about the first 2, but I'll just quickly discuss them. The emptiness of entry, I don't know how Dharma Master Fan explained last time, but entry can refer to the entrances of the inner and outer entrances, which means the eyes, the sense organs, and the sense objects. Eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind as empty, and then also their objects, meaning the perceived objects of forms, sounds, smells, tastes, objects of touch, and dharmas, mental objects. They're all empty of self, meaning if we look into them, we don't find ourself, and we don't find a self nature. But, or let's say we don't find ourself. So this more broadly corresponds to seeing the person as empty. We meditate and see that we ourselves don't have an enduring, unchanging nature. that's what it means by empty. It's not mean. It doesn't mean we're totally nothing. We're there, but we're constantly composed of all these aggregates, and they're constantly in flux. So we don't have a definitive self. We normally analyze it into the 5 skandhas, the 5 aggregates, which obviously we have the body, the form, our skeletal, form, and our flesh and bones and all that, the form, material form. And we have the sensations or feelings that we use our sense organs to perceive. Hot, cold, hard, soft, things like that. And then we have the cognition, which is thoughts and perhaps also emotions. And first, you can see all these 3 so far are already very in flux. Our bodies are constantly changing. Our cells are, renewing all the time, and our feelings. Now we're hot. Now we're cold. Now we're so on, and our thoughts are also very fast-moving and changing, and our emotions as well. So, where can you find a self in there? And then the fourth one is perhaps called karmic formations, or underlying our tendencies in inclinations, kind of like our habitual patterns of what we would be predisposed to do. The 4th one. I'm talking about the 5 skandhas, so yeah. And and then the 5th one would be consciousness. So this, in general, then the first samadhi is about realizing that the person is empty of an enduring nature. The second one is emptiness of own nature, which is translated as being about the emptiness of dharmas. Basically, what we just talked about, form, feeling, those are all kind of dharmas, and then Buddhism analyzed all of our reality into a whole bunch of dharmas, or kind of constituents of our experience. And some of them are mental and associated with the mind, and some are not. Some are material. And so all of these also they also have no enduring essential nature. They are just kind of, we categorize and distinguish them, and then they become our attachment to what is an illusory reality. So does that make sense? Maybe for people who have heard this before, it makes sense. Maybe for people who have not heard it before, it doesn't make sense. So let me know if it doesn't make sense. We can give more examples. But in general, okay. So some of the dharmas, for example, we just listed earlier the eyes, the ears, nose. What we mean by empty simply means that it's constantly changing. There's no fixed thing that's there, forever. So and I think most people realize that, right? That the rose is going to wilt, the hot water is going to get cold. Everything's changing. Even this nice table is one day going to fall apart, or get, cracked or burned or whatever. Nothing is going to last forever. Nevertheless, the way we usually treat things and people is as if they were going to, and ourselves, is we tend to think we're going to be here forever, and we want our loved ones to be here forever. We want every pleasurable experience to last a long time. And we that's just the way our mind works, because we make an attachment to this is a thing, and therefore it stays around. And mostly the problem is our mind. If we didn't make all these distinctions and attach emotional values to them, like, is this good for me? Then I want it, and I'm going to pursue it, and then I'm going to be very upset if I don't get it, whether it's a job or admission to a school or a partner or a grade or a good meal, or the present that I wanted for Valentine's Day or whatever. So because we have these constructs and we get attached to them, that's where the suffering comes from. And that's why that's called not seeing things as empty, not seeing the dharmas as empty. And it's really hard to stay in emptiness. That's why I thought maybe Jin Kaisa could talk about why she wanted to go to Gold Sage Monastery to bow the medicine master repentance, which is a ceremony, and it's all in Chinese for the most part. So, because she knows some Chinese, I'm sure, but not enough to really understand what the repentance, the chanting is talking about. It's a really meaningful repentance, but why would she go and bow if she doesn't understand the language?
Hanging Chair's being very kind.
Spend the weekend. She was planning to spend the whole weekend there until I asked her to come and be with me. So,
Hanging Chair's being very kind. I don't know Chinese really, but I wanted to go and experience the medicine master ceremony, and I was really pleasantly surprised. Of course, it's a very beautiful place. It was my first time there at Gold Sage Monastery in San Jose, with rolling hills and very beautiful. And the people there were really nice, the Dharma masters and the lay people, very accommodating, very kind, very, very wonderful. And then the bowing started, and it's interesting. Like I said, I can't decipher Chinese. I don't know Chinese, but something happened, and I know that we learn that when we bow, we are diminishing our arrogance. We are doing many things when we bow. We are decreasing our negative karma. We are bowing to our inner self-nature, our inner potential for awakening or for liberation. Those are some of the intellectual things that I know bowing accomplishes. But for me, when I put my head down and lowered my body down to the cushion and got up, and after a while, it was just a peace, a general feeling of peace and well-being just kind of came over me, and a connection with everyone there. We just felt as one. It felt as if everyone was just one being, that we were not separate. And we bowed down and then got up, and it was like a kind of like a breathing. It was almost as if we were breathing in unison. Everybody got up and breathed. It was like we were one big body. Everyone was one big body. It was a very beautiful and a very unexpected. Of course, this is not my first time bowing. I've been doing that, all the years at City of 10,000 Buddhas, and I like it. But this is maybe I was in a different place today, and I don't know what the reason, but I just felt a super connection with everything and everyone that was going on there. And Hangin Sher and I had some discussion about that earlier. And what else did I say anything else? I don't remember what else we might have talked about in terms of the bowing and connected to emptiness.
I think basically, I think her experience, it can show that, and I'm sure maybe you have also experienced this. A lot of people come to a Chinese monastery and they're maybe turned off by everything being in Chinese, the chanting, the robes, the music, the food, the whatever, and feel like, oh, I can't fit in, or I can't, belong. But somehow, and that may be the case. And also some people may be, because they're Christian or something, they see all the golden Buddhas and they get a red flag that, oh, we're idol worship or something. But then we explain that the intent of it is that these are just symbols and they're reminding us of our inner brightness and our inner awakening. So then, and that when you bow, you can, if you're a Christian or you believe in a God or another kind of deity, you can be praying to them and thinking of them, rather than something inner. It's up to you, and it's flexible. For even those who don't think anything, and just the motion of going down, it's a kind of a yogic thing. You're lowering yourself. Because constantly we're using our heads to think and to discriminate, to judge. When we do something that requires us to just focus on something, our physical, whether we're chanting, the sound of it, the vibrations of it, and then also the physical movement, the gravity, and it has an effect that's not negligible. It's important. It helps us to get out of our head, so that chanting and meditation, maybe reciting sutras, you're still processing a lot about what the meaning is, but unless you don't understand the language, then it becomes a mantra.
Yeah. Yes, and I certainly didn't. I just remembered one thing that we said. We said, on the outside, somebody looking on at all these people bowing and getting up and bowing again, it might appear to be just, blind obedience, like we're just, everybody's just, doing rote, something that's very rote, and, but there's so much more to it to bowing than meets the eye.
I think the closest thing for me was, before becoming a nun, or encountering Buddhism, was being in a band. I played the flute, and then the whole flute section was playing in unison, and then we were harmonizing with the clarinets and the trumpets and all that. So I really felt a sense of being part of something greater, and it was really uplifting. And then I had the same feeling when we were chanting together in the Buddha hall. Of course, none of us were, not none of us, some of us, most of us were not professional with music training, so people may have chanted out of tune or out too loud or too slow or whatever, but still it had its own kind of harmony, and its own kind of resonating, that I guess it lightens the burden of the self. Usually when we're doing something that's thinking, we tend to be very conscious of ourself, especially something like being on stage. For me, that was like, it's very hard to forget yourself when you're in front of people. And it took me, I had to go through the practice of translation, because I happen to know a little bit of Chinese, so people pulled me on stage to translate for other people. And because as a translator, you had to just take down whatever somebody else was saying, and you didn't have to think of what to say. So it was very automatic and I could do it without being self-conscious. And I could, say it out in front of hundreds of people, no problem. And then after that, it helped. But I think these practices, the point is to get out of this discriminating mind and the sense of self. So.
And the discriminating mind that's the seventh, in terms of the Yogacara school, that's the seventh consciousness, is it?
Yes, well, the sixth one also discriminates, but the seventh one is the one who discriminates in terms of yourself. Yes, like, is this good for me or not? It's it's got an attachment to the self. It has the sense of self. So we're just going to move on a little bit. The third samadhi, and if you have questions, please feel free to stop. Yes. Okay.
Student asks, will BTTS have the Medicine Master Buddha repentance test in English soon?
We actually, Medicine Master repentance? Well, if okay.
Oh, really?
Okay. Okay, so YC said that in Berkeley Monastery they already printed it many years ago and bowed it here a couple times. So, so maybe Gold Sage should make copies of those when they bow it, and other monasteries too. Okay, good. Thank you for the question. Yeah, there's still a lot to be translated, and it's good when people make requests. So. The third one is samadhi of emptiness in the primary sense. Primary sense is DEE. It means usually we talk about the absolute or the highest or the ultimate truth, as opposed to an expedient kind of truth. So, and in this sense, it means that you're seeing things as both existing, but they're existing through arising, dependent on other conditions, and even dependent on consciousness. And at the same time, they're also empty in the sense that they're empty of not having an independent reality. So that's why in Mahayana Buddhism, we often talk about wonderful existence, which is the same as true emptiness. So it just means that everything in the world is existing, but only contingently. It's not existing on its own and lasting forever, but it's like the flower is, it's dependent on everything that came into having it produced, the water, the sunlight, the people who took care of and raised it, and the nutrition from the soil and so forth. And we are also very contingent beings. We exist because of, for example, our parents and all the nurturing that we got from different people, and the physical nutriment that we got, and all the media, the information that we take in to our brains, and a million other things. So we're all very contingent, interdependent beings. So that's samadhi of emptiness in the primary sense. Okay, and then we skip to the fifth one, the samadhi of great emptiness and the samadhi of emptiness of combining. And these two, they're kind of analyzed in terms of the seventh and eighth consciousness, according to National Master Qing Liang. So it's basically, according to him, it's contemplating the eighth consciousness as being the matrix of the Tathagata, another big term. The matrix of the Tathagata is sometimes also called the womb or the treasury of the Tathagata is a name meaning thus come one, which is the name of a title for the Buddha, any Buddha. So it just basically it's something that encompasses everything. It's the eighth consciousness also has that capacity to encompass all the dharmas, as numerous as the sands of the Ganges River. That's a favorite term to describe something really incountable. And then seeing that all these dharmas have the same kind of nature, meaning that they don't have their own separate intrinsic nature. They're all arising, mutually dependent, mutually responsive. And then this this thing is all pervasive. So it's called great emptiness. If we can contemplate our experience that way, or everything, our reality that way, then that everything is coming from our eighth consciousness, which is called the storehouse consciousness or foundational consciousness, root consciousness. It's the place where all of our experiences are stored as seeds. We plant these seeds in this field of this consciousness, and then when the time is right, they sprout out in reaction or to certain conditions. And then seeing this as being the same as what's called the matrix of the thus come one, which is basically, we all have that. It's the womb where the Buddha to be is carried. So basically we are the Buddha to be, or sometimes it's translated as an embryo. We're a Buddha who's in a fetal stage, because even though we have all of the pure meritorious qualities of the Buddha, we're temporarily covered over by some defilements, which are afflictions and attachments and all those different things that are unwholesome. But nevertheless, it's this capability is the same in all living beings. And then it can be seen in its empty mode and in its non-empty mode. The empty mode just means that we kind of see everything arising, but it's all kind of elusive, ethereal. And then, on the other hand, the non-empty mode means that this mind is endowed with all of the pure meritorious qualities, and also all the karma that is based on delusion. You want to say something?
Yeah, I just thought of that. Maybe I could add a little something. You remind me. I was thinking about a story I read about a young man in reference to the Buddha nature, in reference to the fact that we all have this nature, this Buddha nature. It goes by many different names. This young man grew up in an area of Boston, and he grew up with a single mom who herself had just come out of a really bad bout of addiction with drugs and alcohol. She was a single mom raising two young boys. It was in the 70s, and she was black, and she learned Buddhism, and she learned recitation, mantra recitation, and mantra recitation became her Dharma door. It became her rock. It became her strength. And every day she practiced mantra recitation, and she taught her children as young as 1 and 2 year old to recite the mantras. And they grew up with seeing their mom pulling herself out of a bad situation, and seeing their mom going back to school and struggling as a single mom and working very hard, and yet following the principles of Buddhism and helping people around her who were also suffering, teaching them what she knew of Buddhism. and he as a I don't know 8-year-old boy, he recalls going on a school trip. He was going to compete in some event, and he felt that he got a response that particular day because he was in a competition, and in the back of the school bus he just kept repeating these Buddhist mantras, and he went home with 2 gold medals from the competition, and that kind of sealed things for him as a young child, and he recognized how powerful that was. And throughout his teenage years, when a lot of his friends were getting pulled into, because they lived in inner city rough area of Boston, and he lost a lot of friends. A lot of friends died or went into really bad situations with alcohol, with drugs, and because of the Buddhism that his mom clung to and that his mom taught himself and his brother, he was able to rise above all that, and he made friends from all different nationalities. He never got pulled in by peer pressure, or because he realized that everyone had the Buddha nature. He never had the need to fit in or to follow the crowd or to do drugs or to smoke or whatever, because he was confident within himself that everyone had this inner goodness. And ultimately, he wanted to excel in football, and he wanted to attend medical school. And he remembers his coach telling him, "Oh no, you're not even at the level to clean the toilets in that particular school that he had his eye on." And he thought, well, he would work really hard, but in addition to that, he just kept his mantra practice up every day, and he really upped the ante. He really put a lot more effort into the mantras and Buddhist practice and doing his in addition to his academic work. And ultimately, he did make that school, that his and the teams. He was able to make those be accepted in the school and by the team that his coach thought he would never make it. And at the time he wrote this story, he was getting ready to apply for medical school, or he had been accepted and was trying to make his way into medical school. And he really credits his success and the success of his family to his Buddhist practice and to the principles that he learned in Buddhism, and to the core of recognizing that everyone has the Buddha nature and everyone has the potential for greatness.
Story. So we all have this matrix of the Tathagata, which is this embryo of the Buddha, in a picture of that. And then it's also the eighth consciousness. So then, just seeing the whole world in that way, kind of like this guy who saw that everyone had this embryo of the Buddha within themselves, and seeing actually that everything comes out of this, the whole world comes out of this, the consciousness that we basically, our world is created out of our consciousness, because the way we perceive things is also different depending on what's inside our consciousness, what kind of seeds we have in there. We do have, of course, a shared world in some sense that maybe we have some similar seeds, so we see things similarly, but not exactly the same. As you probably know from every argument that happens when people said, but I thought it was this way, and she said, no, this is what I saw. So we actually don't see things very similarly, although, enough similarly that we can say, yes, the rose is red and and so forth. But we do tend to see things differently based on our own karmic conditioning. The next one is called the samadhi of emptiness of combining. And you could say generally that everything comes into being through combining, the combining of different conditions and factors. So it's dependent, and then therefore it's empty of a enduring substance, of an intrinsic nature. But more specifically, Master Ching Liang talks about contemplating the 7 consciousnesses. So we talk about the 8th consciousness as being this field from the ground from which everything arises. And then among those things that arise are the 7 consciousnesses, which are the first 5 consciousnesses having to do with our 5 senses. So when the eyes see forms, then there's an eye consciousness, a visual consciousness. Then when we hear sounds, then there's an auditory consciousness. And same for the nose, tongue, and body. And then there's the 6th consciousness, which is our mind, and how it processes mental objects, called we call dharmas. And the 7th consciousness, the one that kind of evaluates everything in terms of the self, and also transmits things between the mind consciousness and the 8th consciousness. So, because these first 7 consciousnesses arise through their dependence on the 8th consciousness, they also have no essential nature, and they're empty. So we shouldn't therefore, attach to so much to the things that we see, hear, and smell, and so forth, all the way through thinking, because and judging, because they're not enduring, and they're not independent. Does that make sense? Okay. There's an analogy that basically the mind is, the 8th consciousness is like the ocean, and then the 7 consciousnesses, the first through the 7th consciousnesses, are like waves. So they appear differently. Basically, our visual consciousness and our auditory consciousness and our nose consciousness, they all seem to be different, right? We seem to think we're using a different part of our brain to see things, to hear things, but actually it's all consciousness. It's all water. We're different waves, but it's all ultimately water. And goes back to this 8th consciousness. Okay, so these 5 are the different kind of contemplations, and they might seem a little bit difficult, but if you work at it's difficult to make it become part of your life, to really see things that way, as contingent and interdependent and not lasting forever, and not fixed. But if we can do that, then we will open up a lot of freedom in our lives. We will see a lot of different ways that things could be done, perspectives, and we have a lot more room to operate in.
So a question. So another word or another way to describe emptiness could be constantly changing or non-enduring, or yeah.
Yeah, you could say that's how things are.
Okay.
Somehow, I think in Western philosophy and also in Indian philosophy, for something to really exist, it has to be a permanent substance. It has to be something. So they analyze maybe that there's this Atman or something that is that's permanent, and then in Western also there's the substance or the ideas, the forms. But nothing in the world, if you don't abstract things like that, nothing in the world is really like that. So That's why we have to contemplate this emptiness, because it goes against the grain. The next one is emptiness of arising. So now we're switching from the contemplations to non-laxness. This one is about non-laxness. So we've contemplated that the self is empty, that phenomena or dharmas are empty, and then that everything is interdependently arising, that the eighth consciousness is this matrix of the thus come one, the Buddha. It's a great void in which everything arises but is kind of, in flux. And then the first 7 consciousnesses are also all empty, being arising out of the eighth. And now it's about cultivating based on this, acting accordingly by not getting attached and not taking things too seriously. And then performing these contemplations without laxness, cultivating them to the utmost degree, so that basically your emptiness, your understanding of emptiness becomes foremost, becomes very, very high. So, and it's foremost both in the sense that you're cultivating, you're figuring out what's good to cultivate, what's wholesome, and then you're cultivating that based on these contemplations. And then you're also keep cultivating it without getting tired. You don't give up and you just quit. So then you keep extending and advancing in your cultivation. So you're foremost in moving forward. That's what this samadhi is about. Then the next one is samadhi of emptiness of arising. So this one is about, as you keep going, then you attain an excellence in cultivating and perfecting the cultivating of virtues. So maybe we mentioned earlier how this matrix of the thus come one, within it contains all the limitless virtues of the Buddhas, meritorious virtues. So as we cultivate, we start to give rise to all these virtues, these meritorious qualities that are really wonderful. And then the last 3 are about how to be in the world. Sometimes you might imagine that in order to contemplate these things, you have to be apart from the world to kind of really focus. Otherwise, when you're too caught up when you're too busy working or doing whatever in the world, it may be we tend to forget and we start to take everything seriously. I know I do when I'm working. I want to do it right, and I want to. I take it very seriously, but then sometimes that gets us in a lot of stress and a lot of suffering. When we have to make this deadline, but we're pushing ourselves really hard. There's nothing wrong with that, but I'm just saying that it doesn't give you a lot of space to contemplate emptiness, because it's really hard, right? Especially if you're in the school and all these kids are, you need to calm them down and cover the material, make sure they learn, and also solve all their problems and do everything on schedule. So, however, that is also the practice ground. It's not that you have to go off completely, but maybe you do need, you need to make space to meditate, have some quiet time to reflect, and just not have to constantly have this mind be turning, so churning, basically, not turning, only churning. So you need to have that space to kind of let it settle, so the clarity comes. When the clarity comes, then it's kind of, then things become more obvious that, yes, things are empty, so why am I getting so upset and worked up over whatever.
We do forget, don't we? When I get afflicted, I forget all that. It's just, so it's a good reminder.
So the next the next three of them are talking about once we've already reached, we've given rise to a lot of meritorious virtues and attained a level of excellence, then now how we apply that in the world, it's also a kind of samadhi. And then the first one, undiscriminated emptiness as it truly is, means based on these virtues that are cultivated, now we have some extra capacities. These are actually inherent capacities, but we've kind of now regained them. So the first one is actually a self-benefiting one. Basically, it's helpful to ourselves. And it's talking about how it's undiscriminated, meaning we've already cleared away cognitive hindrances, 知障. It's called the hindrance of what is known. Basically, when we know too much and we hang on to that knowledge, then we obstruct ourselves from seeing a bigger picture. So when we are able to clear away these cognitive hindrances, we can realize the emptiness of the reality, and then we will be able to operate in a way that we don't actually have to make so many distinctions. I've been reading more some Taoist texts, so I can give some examples, because there's a lot of descriptions of how the sage or the perfected person is. Basically, they are able to have an effect on the world that's beneficial simply by their presence. They've cultivated themselves to the point that their very presence brings harmony to those around them, cleanses other people around them of their afflictions, of their anger, makes them feel calm. And yet, this person, of course, he doesn't think of himself as a sage. That's a name that other people give him or her. And he doesn't have any intention to be benefiting people. He's just simply clarified his awareness to such an extent that it interpenetrates and it, infuses everything. I mean, because he sees that there's no separation anyways. Well, I'm already skipping to the last one about separation, but so it's a natural, spontaneous kind of effect, and affect too. But in this case, the first one is mostly first about realizing the emptiness of the reality by not making distinctions. And then the second one, the last two, is actually more direct benefit towards others. So non-forsaking emptiness is how one stays in the world and accords with the world and teaches living beings. Because one sees that things are all empty in the sense of everything is interdependent in this web of interdependence. Nothing can be, stand alone. And then one gives rise to compassion because one realizes, well, I'm not actually separate from all of you. We're all part of the same web. And however, maybe I've realized that a little more and then you haven't realized it, so then I can share with you something so that you won't keep hitting the wall and getting upset because you're seeing reality in a limited or fixed way. So this is called non-forsaking emptiness, because emptiness is certainly not about going into this kind of dull void state and not, that is kind of really dead. It's very alive and it's dynamic and it's very vast because of this interconnectedness. so that even everything, even the people that we think are total strangers, are part of our connected web. So that's why bodhisattvas, they make vows. And their vows always say, "I vow that all living beings, blah blah blah." So that sounds very grandiose, but that's because they realize that all living beings, at least all the living beings in their reality, are really part of their consciousness too. So we're not, it's not something that they could actually ignore or push away, ultimately. So I just finished the last one. And the last one is samadhi of non-separating separation. That sounds, it basically means because you understand emptiness, you're able to separate from afflictions, from getting caught up in something that's unwholesome or unbeneficial to unskillful, and not get yourself afflicted or not cause afflictions to others. And at the same time, while you can separate from afflictions, that doesn't mean you separate from living beings. You don't have to withdraw or isolate from yourself. You can actually go along with everything. Everything's okay. Basically, our teacher used to say, everything's okay, don't worry. No matter what happens, no matter how, usually this is the difference. You may be in one state of cultivation, and somebody says something, or some huge pressure gets dumped on you from your job, and you find it terrible and hard to bear. But if you're in a different state where you can see, emptiness to some extent, then you actually is like, okay, since you don't see yourself as someone important, someone who has a lot to lose, whether it's your image, your reputation, or your wealth, or even your life, but actually you see yourself as part of something greater, then these things don't hit so hard. Does that make sense? Does that make any sense? Yes, I know, it's hard. It's okay, good question. Now let me repeat, not question, comment, let me repeat that. She said it's really hard because we do make discriminations, and sometimes there are discriminations of holding the precepts. For example, we know what is to hold the precepts and what is not to hold the precepts. And if we see somebody else not holding the precepts, and we're trying not to discriminate and say, oh, whatever, we don't want to care about that. Right? Is that what you mean? Yeah. A Buddhist? Okay. Yeah, and for that person may be a Dharma master. And yes. Okay. So yeah, you may see people in leadership positions that are not being good models, and you're trying not to be judgmental, right? And that's very hard. So I guess, and I agree, it's very hard when we see a lot of things that are unjust, seemingly at least unjust. From our perspective, from what we know, we can think that they're unjust. Well, I guess the only way is we can consider that there are other perspectives and there is information that we don't know. And regarding, it's kind of a sensitive thing to talk about, but monastics who may seemingly be not holding the precepts, okay, it's not a DRBA monastic. Well, even amongst ourselves, none of us holds the precepts perfectly or 100%, because the precepts, especially some of the Bodhisattva precepts are really ideals, and we're all striving to go towards them. Another thing about Buddhism is we take precepts for ourselves and we don't judge others for the most part, unless we're trying to help somebody. Like our fellow cultivator is breaking the precepts, and we really care about them. We don't want them to go down the wrong path and harm their nature. So then we want to skillfully exhort them. And then that's the whole key. Can we skillfully exhort them? We have to assess ourselves. Do we have what it takes do we have the virtue or the rapport or with that person to be able to say something that they won't take in the wrong way, that we are making them feel worse. Where we want them to, it's because we care. And then we have to, of course, examine our own motive. Are we doing it because we care, or because we want to make them look bad, or because we're just critical? So, and of course, we also have to have the Dharma, what we call the Dharma selecting eye, or kind of discernment about what is wholesome and what is unwholesome for ourselves to follow, and also because we care about, perhaps this teaching as a whole. We want people to be able to recognize what is actually taught and what is a kind of a distortion of the teaching. So there's a lot of factors. That doesn't answer anything, but...
I guess I was just reflecting on the previous, when you were talking about vows and the Bodhisattva making vows, and I don't recall all of the medicine master's vows, but I think one of them that made a pretty strong impact on me was that one of his vows was to protect people from untimely deaths, and there's so much in our world now, and in the news, and so many tragedies and so many things going on, and sometimes the students themselves, will bring up a situation like, gee, I wonder why did this have to happen, this massacre or whatever, people's lives being violently lost, and where am I going with that?
I think that's a really, probably if you watch the news, the normal news, it's all bad news. There's only a few news that gives you a little bit of what good people are doing in the world, but most of the news is really tragic, I think, and you see people, like the 3 Muslim students who were just shot, and also all kinds of things that and when I see them, I also feel this really terrible. On the one hand, of course, you could say, yes, everything has its causes and conditions and its karmic conditions, but the main thing is there was a lot of suffering, and the Bodhisattvas care about people suffering, and want to be able to relieve suffering. So what can we do to end that kind of tragic, when people are resorting to violence? I mean, I can only say that when somebody who resorts to violence, they themselves, in their nature, they also have the Buddha embryo, but it's maybe very, very covered over. They have completely lost touch with it. So that, and then I guess this leads to just the idea of virtual reality these days. People kind of exist in a space that's really unreal, and even our methods of warfare and so forth are so disconnected. It's on computer, it's virtual, it's pushing buttons and, guiding things from afar to really harm people physically and real. But there's this kind of mediation between the reality that's really felt and the acting of it. So I think that's a real problem, and technology has a lot to do with it. So part of what we're trying to do is we have to ultimately solve the problem is to have people all connect to their nature, because this nature, the Buddha nature, is inherently compassionate. If you're connected to it, you could not do that kind of thing. You could only see that as terribly wrong. And that's why we say in the Bodhisattva precepts, there's these things about how if you do certain things, you're harming your nature, you're covering up your nature, you're harming your connection to your nature. So avoid doing those things, because you're not going to be able to advance on the path. Rather, in fact, you'll be doing things that go against the path. So just killing in general is one thing, and there's a huge amount of killing, not only of humans, but of animals. And actually, they're connected. There's this one lady named Karen Davis, and I don't really mean to advertise for her, but I really do think what she's done is pretty amazing. She was an English professor at the University of Maryland before, and then she learned about you may know that Baltimore area is where a lot of the country's chickens are raised. They're actually, I think, hatched, or the eggs are incubated in a different part of the country, and then once they're hatched, they're shipped over to Baltimore where they're raised big, and then they're shipped out again as meat. So because I think even her neighbor was raising, I don't have time to tell the whole story, but basically she was surrounded by chicken raising factory farms, and also even people with kind of smaller farms. And so her first encounter with a chicken was when her neighbor had like 100 chickens, and they all got shipped off to the slaughterhouse. And then she went into the chicken barn, and then she found one little chicken there, that little hen that was still there, but it was kind of like not able to walk very well, and it was very scared, and it was just trying to dig itself into a dark corner. And she brought it back to her home and kind of nursed it back to health. And then the bird, which she named Viva, would kind of, chirp, or I don't know, they don't chirp, they cluck into her ear and try to tell her stuff. And she really developed a friendship with it. But it died, a few months later. But after that, somehow she became known as the Underground Railroad for chickens. And when they're shipping these chickens in trucks, there's often chickens that fall off, or maybe a whole box falls off, a crate. And so there's these chicken rescues, and then they all say, "Oh, that lady, she likes chickens." So in the end, now her house is full of chickens of all different sizes, shapes, and kinds. And then she got so into this, so horrified by the industry, that she decided to found a nonprofit called United Poultry Concerns, and then they do things like they write petitions and letters to people who in the media are showing cruelty to poultry. And then I just saw this one public radio station. They have, around Thanksgiving, they have a poultry slam. They have people write about chickens and turkeys in kind of derogatory ways and for fun. And so she had all of her volunteers write letters to this radio station. And then the radio show host was on David Letterman's show telling about how I got all these letters and from this chicken lady, and then it's like telling me that it's really disrespectful to the chicken what we're doing. And I was like, well, I don't know. So, but then the lady called me up and she said, well, you should come to my house and meet these chickens and then you'll understand why. And so since I didn't live too far, I went to her house and then he asked David Letterman, have you ever been around chickens? And then he said, only one braised breast at a time or something like that. It was a very crude comment. But she said, well, chickens, her house is full of them, and I found that they all have different personalities. Some are really shy, and some are really outgoing, and, they all have different characters. So then I went back home, and every time I ordered chicken, I started thinking about those chickens and how some of them were shy and some were outgoing and blah, blah, blah. And then I started, gradually, I couldn't eat any more chickens. And basically, and then David Letterman said, so that's how you became a vegetarian? And he said, yeah. So anyways, she did a lot of research, and she found out that, I think his name was Heinrich Himmler or something, in the Holocaust, working for Hitler, the guy who did a lot of the killing, and he was a farmer. I forgot if it was a chicken farmer or some other kind of animal farmer, but anyways, it was because the industry was already so cruel to animals. So for him to just transfer that to Jews who had been stripped of all their clothes and had to huddle together, he could basically in his mind think, oh, defeathered chickens and naked Jews were basically the same. I could do the same thing to them so easily because I've already blunted my compassion through treating whatever it was he farmed, whether it's chickens or pigs or something, this way. So when people have blunted, compassionate sensibilities, it's much easier to treat people that way. I don't know if you know anyone who works for the farm industry. I know, of course, some farms are different, but in the factory farm industry or in the slaughterhouse, most of those, the highest rate of domestic violence, those people, because they have, and when they're, last year I also met somebody from UC Davis who went through the agricultural science major, and then she went to work on an intern in some kind of farm, and she was just horrified because she went into the field because she loved animals, but then she talked about how, in the pigs, when there are pigs or turkeys or any other, that don't make it because they got sick or they got injured, and then the workers have to put them down. And then if they try to put them down in some mechanical way and it doesn't completely kill them, then they go and basically take them and then slam them against the ground or stomp on them or something. She was crying when she was talking about this, but it was very horrifying. So now she's working for an animal sanctuary. But anyways, it's mostly, we don't blame the people who are, enjoying the products of the farm because they don't realize what goes on because it's all hidden away. Not like when I was in Mexico, we were welcomed onto the farms, we got tours. In America, it's all behind, barbed wire fences and these warehouses with no windows and so forth. Because people, if they saw it, they would immediately raise, that's why there are a lot of more and more animal advocates who are saying this is totally inhumane. In fact, the farm animal rights movement is founded and led by a Holocaust survivor because when he went to see the conditions, it immediately brought him back to his conditions, suffering during the Holocaust. I mean, the same kind of inhumane treatment. The time is already up, but I wanted to make a small announcement. Okay. We're kind of excited, and this is not completely confirmed, but we're hoping to liberate, we have something called Liberating Life, and that's kind of to counteract killing karma, that Buddhists try to liberate animals who were doomed to die for consumption or for hunting or whatever, we usually get the animals from the Bay Area and we bring them up to the city and we have them go through an hour-long ceremony where we do a lot of praying and blessing and give them the 3 refuges and speak Dharma to them and so forth. And then we release them. Well, because the animals we release are usually imported, there's from Chinatown sometimes, and the species, they're not meant to survive in California very well. So when we release them, they don't have very good chances of survival. So at least they got the refuges, but they also don't have a very long life after that. So I propose that we also liberate a farmed animal, because they're, being killed by the millions all the time, daily. And why not at least liberate one of them? So it was agreed. Of course, we're not going to raise the pig, but we're going to give it to a sanctuary, and the sanctuary will raise it. And so I called the sanctuary in Santa Rosa, because they're just family owned, and I said, we'd like to liberate a pig. Could you go out and find a pig for us, one that's going to be butchered? So they said, okay, sure, we'll go. We know some farmers, we'll go buy a pig from them. And then a few days later, she said, it's kind of amazing, but guess what happened? We got a call, and we've never had a call like this before, but a piglet was found wandering on the highway and must have fallen off of a truck. It's only about a week old, and so here's your piglet, and you don't even have to buy it. So we're really happy, because originally we were like, a pig is really big, probably can't go into the Buddha hall. We'll have to move the ceremony outside. But a piglet, she says, is about the size of a kitten, so we can bring it into the hall. And then I know all of our girls will be able to interact with it, and hopefully everyone will be able to see it. They're very, very cute. So I hope you all go up for, hopefully on Guanyin session in April, we'll be able to release it. Okay. So we're going to transfer the merit, because from sharing Dharma together, we have whatever merit there is in that, we can now dedicate the merit to all living beings. And if you have any particular beings or family members that you would like to dedicate the merit to who need some help, then you can also think of them in your mind. No? Yes.
Tomorrow is the annual Open Museum event, Welcome to New Year, and there are a lot of monastery-sponsored events. For example, the event starts at 11:30 with the Dharma Buddhist Association Orchestra playing, so that will be going on. Throughout the day, there will be, the boys' school will be doing a lion dance and closing off with a dragon dance. And in between, there will be more activities such as the aunties from the monastery doing spring roll making, and Jinko Sher, another monk who is at the monastery, will be doing calligraphy. So that will be going on tomorrow from 11:30 a.m. until 4:30 p.m. If you want to park in Oakland, Sunday street parking is free. Otherwise, you can park at the Oakland Museum for a flat rate of $5. So that's going on tomorrow, and everyone's invited.
We can say it on the line.
I don't know if they need it online, but basically, just to quickly repeat, 11:30 to 4:30 is a kind of a Lunar New Year celebration at the Oakland Museum. A lot of the people in the monastery here are participating, including Dharma Master Jingfo will be doing calligraphy to welcome in the new year, and our kitchen was completely packed this afternoon because people were preparing for probably making spring rolls in the in the Chinese or the Lunar New Year kind of celebration. So if people have the time, you're very welcome to go and participate. I don't know if there's any other particular announcements that we have that's going on. Anything else? Okay, well, what's the third day of the Lunar New Year? So happy Lunar New Year to everybody. I was saying this morning, it's like for the Westerners who aren't used to Chinese New Year or Lunar New Year, it's like Christmas, Thanksgiving, your birthday, probably all the other holidays rolled into one for a whole week.
Actually, usually for 2 weeks.
2 weeks, 2 weeks. Yeah, I didn't grow up with Lunar New Year.
I think in Taiwan they get, like we were going to have the cookbook printed, and they said, well, they're closed until the first week of March. Now we'll do 3 bows to the Buddha.